Are you able to see my screen now? Is my screen visible to all?
Yeah. Mm.
Okay. So we are going to learn about SQL in this session. So before proceeding to the SQL, first of all, we need to know why we are using SQL and what is the scope of SQL in development and in uh, QA streams. So there are two streams. One is development, one is QA. So we need to know what are the scope of SQL in both these streams. So we'll take both the example parallelly. Then once we are able to understand what is database, why we are using SQL, and why we are only using SQL, and what is the scope in different streams, then we'll proceed further to look into this SQL queries. So this is the agenda for our course. So we are going to learn about all these queries. So before starting the actual SQL queries, how to write query before starting that purpose, first of all, we need to understand what is the requirement of SQL. So SQL is generally used for writing queries. That queries are generally used for interacting with the database. So if we talk about mainly SQL, SQL is the short form of structured query language, and this structured query language is pronounced as SQL, or sometimes some people call it as SQL. So if someone asks you about SQL or SQL, both mean the same thing. So why we are using SQL? First of all, we need to understand. Like if I take example of some application, let's say if I take example of Facebook.com. So I think everyone are aware of Facebook.com. Everyone is using that. Now, whenever you are using Facebook.com, you need to log in the Facebook using your credentials like username and password, and then you click on login button. Then on the click on login button, how the system knows that we have entered the correct username, and how system came to know that this is the account of this particular user. So all these things are happening with the help of SQL. So SQL is generally what it is doing. It is interacting with the database running at the backend, and with the help of that, we are able to retrieve that information. So first of all, we need to understand what is the structure of web application. Then we are going to understand about SQL, that how SQL is working. So for understanding that, first of all, we need to understand how our database system will work. So let me open a Word document for that. Then I'll explain you that thing. I'm going to take the example of the same Facebook login page. Okay. Suppose I'm working on this application. This is my application on which I'm working. This is the front end, or you can say UI of my application. Now, in this application, what I need to test if I'm entering correct username and password, whether I'm able to access that or not, access that particular user or not. So this is the login page of the application. And suppose in this application, I have my username. Let's say my username is abc@gmail.com, because it is taking mail ID of user. Let's say this is the username, and this is the password. 1 2 3 4 5 6. Suppose this is the password. So if I enter this both information, if I enter abc@gmail.com over here, and if I enter password over here, and then I click on login button, within a fraction of second, I am able to see the desktop. I am able to see the dashboard of my user account on the screen if I'm entering the correct username and password. So how this is happening? So this is the UI. This UI is generally developed in form of HTML pages. This UI is in form of HTML pages. These HTML pages at the back end are interacting with the code. Maybe that code is written in JavaScript or PHP or Java, any language they can use. Maybe here we have JavaScript. Maybe we have uh, we have JavaScript, we have PHP. So in that code that is written on this uh, behind the screen. So if I show you behind every screen, a code is running. If I show you the example of that, if I again open this application and uh, let me first clear this screen, then I'll show you. So if in this application I want to see the code, what is written behind this screen, I need to right click on that, I need on this page, and if I click on view page source, you are able to see the code written at the back end, and the code is in form of HTML. And inside this HTML, there are multiple scripts running, like you can see. So don't we are not going into that detail how that code is written. Just to give you idea that behind every screen a code is running. For that purpose, I have shown you that screen. Otherwise, we are not going to in that detail because we are here to learn about SQL, not about the coding. So this is the UI. So behind this UI, there is a screen. Let's say here we have a code. Here we have a code written in JavaScript or in PHP, whatever language is there. That doesn't matter. So whenever I'm entering username over here, like abc@gmail.com, and I'm entering some password over here, like 1 2 3 4 5 6. It is sending this page is sending this request based on the code written over here. It is sending this request to the backend. There is a backend system that is running behind the application that is storing all the data. So what is a database? Database is a, you can say it's a type of container that is used for storing all the data that we need to access the application. So at the back end of application, there is a database management system. What this database will do, it will store all the information that we are trying to enter on this website. Because the reason why we are using the concept of database at the back end, the reason is that like you are creating your account on the Facebook. So whenever you come to the Facebook for the first time, what you will do for the first time, you will click on this create new account button and you will enter your information. Here you will enter your mobile number or email address. Here you will enter your password. Then you click on sign up button. Then the account got created. Once the account got created, you need to use the same user ID and password to log in your account. You need to remember that. So how system will remember that what information you have stored regarding your account? It is going to store all this information regarding your user account inside the database. And whenever you are trying to log in with the same user and password, from here, it is sending the request with the help of this code to the database. And in this database, the request is going in form of SQL queries that we are going to learn over here. So here from this code is further sending the data request to this database in form of SQL queries. And these SQL queries is going to validate the username and password that we have entered over here. First of all, this username and password is collected by the code, and this code is further sending this username and password by converting it into the SQL script. Now, in this database, we have data stored in different tables. Okay, like we have multiple users. This is your user account. This is second user account. This is third user account. So we are storing the data inside the tables like we are storing in Excel sheet. Similar type of data table we have inside the database. So this is the table that we are going to read. Every table have some name, and that name is entered in the SQL query while developing the code. So whenever I'm sending this request to SQL query, it is going to interact with particular table. And in this table, we have different columns. Suppose first one is the username column, second one is the password column. So it is going to interact with this table, and it is going to search the data inside this table. If it is found that username and password we have entered exist for particular account, like their username and password are matching, so it is with the help of this SQL query, it is trying to find the particular match of username and password in a particular data table. And if it is successful in finding the result, it will send back the request, send back the OK request to the code, and this code will further send back the OK request to the system, and we are able to successfully log in. Okay. If OK request is received, we are able to successfully log in the Facebook account. Second scenario is that if I'm entering correct username but I'm entering wrong password, or if I'm entering wrong username or incorrect, if I mean to say if I'm entering incorrect credential, so the request will go in same way to the database, but at that time it is searching for the combination of that username and password that we have entered. Since that username and password combination is not available in this database, it is not able to found the result, and as a reply, in this case, it will return not okay or refusal statement to the code, and code will further send this request back to the application, and application will show the error message. In that case, if we are entering wrong credential, it is not able to found that record in the database. And if the record is not found, we have written code in such a way, if the particular combination is not found, then we are unable to log in on the application. So this is one scenario. This is for validating login credentials. Similarly, someone is asking some question. Once again, let me check. Where does API perform? Okay. Yeah, Prashant, API will use in between this code. So API is in form of whenever we are performing some, like I'm saying, if I'm entering some username and password, so at the backend some code is running. So at the backend those web services are running, that is collecting the data from here and sending the data back to the database. And these web services may be developed inside Java platform, and page is designed in JavaScript or PHP. So that would be different combination, that is different scope. In the middle layer where code is running, APIs are working over there for interacting with the database and interacting with the application. And in those API, we have written this SQL queries so that we are able to trigger those query on the database to get the required information. Is that clear?
SQL queries and the API both are different.
Yeah, both are different. Actually, SQL query is a way of interacting with the database, but API either interact with the database or either it can collect data from some other applications. Like you have seen Make My Trip application. In Make My Trip application, whenever we are searching for the flight, so it is providing us result of different companies website like Indigo. It will provide other website Kingfisher, Indigo, and some other flights also. So how this data is coming on Make My Trip? Whether Make My Trip is maintaining database, because it's not possible to maintain such type of database. The reason behind that, every time in every second flight information is changing. Suppose right now flight is at 5 p.m. Maybe after half hour due to some delay, flight got uh, delayed by half hour. At the now the updated time is 5:30. So whenever we need to track the information that are dynamic, in that case we are using the API whenever we need to interact with different application. Okay. And when we need to interact with the database, either we can choose the API or either we can go with SQL. So that's up to you how you are going to design. Okay. API generally we use to interact with different external system from where we need to fetch the data, and in case of dynamic results. Okay. Because in that database we are maintaining in such cases, like suppose you are working on Amazon, In Amazon, you are uploading your product. When you are uploading your product, you are entering the correct information of the product, and that information is not going to change again and again in every second. Only order table is getting changed if someone is purchasing your product. In that case, you are getting information that one order book, two order book, or one is reverse. So this is not changing very dynamically, and this is related to your single application. So that's why we are maintaining the database. But in case of API, like I have given you one example of Make My Trip, we are interacting with multiple companies' websites. So they expose their web services which we are using to interact with their applications. Okay.
Okay, okay. So same example of the book my show is also same, right? Like that
Yeah,
only,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, like in Book My Show, you are getting the information of different cinemas.
Uh,
And if you look into that particular website of particular cinema, they are different company, but you are getting the information of their website on Book My Show also, right?
yes, yes. Got
So
it, got it.
they are not fetching that information from their database directly. They are that company is exposing their
From
API,
the web
so that
services.
yeah, they expose their APIs or web service that we can use to interact with their database. We cannot directly interact with third company database due to security issue. So only that much information that is required by us, only that much information is exposed by that company that we can use. We cannot completely access their database. Only that part that is accessible with that API, we are able to access that. Okay.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
But in case of SQL, we can interact with the complete database of our company, of our project. Okay.
Okay, okay.
So this is the way how database is interacting. Now, if anyone is having any query till this point, how we are interacting with the database, then you can please ask your questions. Otherwise, I'm going to proceed further. Is that clear till this point?
Yeah, Neeraj.
Okay. So coming further, we have seen how application is interacting. Now we need to see what is the role of developer and QA in this. The role of developer is that he need to design his code that will work on this application. So in his code, he need to write some SQL queries that is going to interact with this database to read or update some information. Like if I'm creating my user account, if I've created my, yeah, some question is here. Uh, okay, Nia is asking, does it come under manual or automation? And it is a database testing. Actually, Nia, database testing we can use anywhere, whether we are doing manual, whether we are doing automation. Only the difference is that when we are doing manual testing, we need to execute SQL queries manually. But when we are going to do the automation, we need to write a script to run those queries. But the basic concept, if you are able to understand the basic concept of database testing, you can execute it manually or automation anywhere. But for running in automation, you need to require automation knowledge, like whatever tool you are using, you need to require that knowledge, like Selenium, QTP, etc. Okay, but the concept will remain same in both the thing, both the approach is manual or automation. Now, if I talk about the scope of developer and QA in this, the scope of development is that whenever a developer is designing this application, he need to keep in mind that I am designing this page, and if I'm going to design this page, and if I have account uh, account information available in the database, because all information is getting stored in database. If I have that information, so when as soon as I enter this information and click on login button, because if there is no code running at the backend, nothing will happen. So to make this page active, he need to write code at the backend. In that code, he need to use SQL queries to read and retrieve. Retrieve means to get the data from the database, or sometime we may require to update the database. In that case, he need to write separate set of statement how to update the database. And sometime you have seen We have added some detail on website, then there is a delete button. If we click on delete button, then delete button will deleted all the data from the database. How it is happening? These are happening because at the back end corresponding SQL queries are running. So there are separate set of query for reading the data. There are separate set of query for updating the data, and there is a separate set of query for deleting or modifying the data. So that as per the scenario the developer is going to design, he need to update his code as per the correct as per the requirement of SQL. So he need to update his code as per the required query. So that is the role of developer in that. And the role of QA is that after the application we are able to access, application is available for testing, then the role of QA is that he need to validate whether the scenario designed by developer is correct or not, whether the scenario, whether the SQL query written by the developer, whether the flow is working correctly or not. So for that, again, he need to write the same SQL query to validate whether at their end all the things are working fine. So if you have knowledge of SQL, then whether you are a developer, whether you are a QA, both will use same type of query for designing. The developer is going to write the query for designing the code, and QA is going to use that query for interacting with the database to validate the test cases. So basic concept will remain same whether you are working in development or in QA. So that's the role of developer and QA. If anyone is having any confusion, any query, then they can please ask. Otherwise, I'm going to proceed further to tell you what is the meaning of database management system. Any query to anyone?